What do these companies have in common? They're all owned, or in some cases, being acquired by a company you've probably never heard of. This is Bending Spoons. And if you're thinking, wait, who? Exactly, because Bending Spoons is probably one of the strangest companies in technology today. It has served more than 1 billion users. It generated $1.31 billion in revenue in 2025. It has acquired a ridiculous collection of internet companies, and in July 2026 it went public on the NASDAQ. Yet somehow, most people have never heard of it. And that's what makes Bending Spoons so interesting. Because this isn't really a story about an Italian software company. It's a story about a company that seems to have figured out a completely different way of building a technology empire.
We are a pretty unusual beast.
Right.
Yeah. Unique almost, I think, as far as I can tell.
But this story starts much smaller. 5 founders: Luca Ferrari, Francesco Patarnello, Matteo Danieli, Luca Querela, and Tomasz Greber. They started Bending Spoons in Copenhagen with around 40,000 euros and eventually moved the company to Milan. And here's the part I love. They didn't immediately go out and buy Evernote. They started small, really small. One early example was an app they acquired for roughly 10,000 euros. The philosophy was simple. Buy something that already has users, improve it, make money, use that money to buy something else, repeat. It's almost embarrassingly simple. One of the most important things to understand about Bending Spoons is what it doesn't do. It doesn't need to invent every product. It doesn't need to discover the next billion user category. Instead, it looks for products that have already proven something: users, distribution, brand, revenue, technology. And then it asks, can we operate this better? That distinction is huge, because building a company from zero is incredibly risky. You don't know whether anyone wants your product. You don't know whether your pricing works. You don't know whether you'll ever acquire users cheaply enough. Bending Spoons starts much further down the funnel. The product already exists. The users already exist. The question becomes, can we make the economics better? And this is where Bending Spoons starts to look less like a traditional startup and much more like an operating-focused investment machine. Take Remini, an AI photo enhancement app. It became one of the company's biggest consumer products, with more than 500 million Android downloads. And Remini is a perfect example of what Bending Spoons likes: huge consumer demand, simple value proposition, strong willingness to pay, and a product that can be monetized through subscriptions. Then there's Evernote, a completely different category. Notes, productivity, an established brand, millions of users. Similarly, WeTransfer, file sharing, Meetup, communities and events, Komoot, outdoor navigation, Splice, video editing, Filmic Pro, professional mobile filmmaking. And this is where Bending Spoons becomes really interesting. Because these businesses don't look like they belong together. There is no obvious consumer ecosystem connecting Evernote to Komoot, or WeTransfer to Remini, or Meetup to Filmic Pro. So why buy all of them? Because the thing being consolidated isn't necessarily the product, it's the operating system behind the products. And if you look closely at the company's website, you'll find something unusual. They actually list their own proprietary technologies: Minerva, Juno, Xena, Galf, Matrix, Pico. These aren't consumer products. They're internal systems designed to help Bending Spoons operate its portfolio. And one of the most interesting is Minerva. Bending Spoons says it started building Minerva back in 2019 to predict user lifetime value. In other words, how much is a user potentially worth to the business over time? But they've continued developing it. The company says Minerva can now make multi-year predictions and use data from other products to generate insights for newly acquired businesses. And that is where this gets really interesting. Because imagine you acquire a new company. You don't just bring in its users, you bring it into an organization that has already operated dozens of other digital products. And suddenly, the lessons from those products can potentially inform the next one. Then there's another system called Pico. Along with Lumen and Abacus, it forms part of Bending Spoons' data infrastructure. And according to the company, this infrastructure processed more than 3.8 billion data points every day on average in the first quarter of 2026. Think about that. Every acquisition generates more products, more users, more experiments, more data, and Bending Spoons is building systems to standardize and make sense of all of it. So the acquisitions aren't just adding revenue, they're potentially adding information to the machine. And then there's the infrastructure that actually runs some of these AI systems. Bending Spoons calls it Pantheon. It's a proprietary GPU inference platform designed to serve AI workloads at scale. One example is Evernote. Bending Spoons recently rebuilt Evernote's search experience around semantic search. And we're not talking about a tiny dataset. Evernote has around 9 billion notes. For active users, Bending Spoons built a semantic index covering roughly 3 billion notes. At one point, the system was running on around 300 GPU machines and processing roughly 5,700 notes per second. And here's the part that really matters. They weren't simply sending all of this data to some external AI API. For this system, Bending Spoons used open-source models and ran the infrastructure themselves. Why? Because at this scale, cost matters, latency matters, customization matters, and perhaps most importantly, data control matters. But AI isn't only being used inside the products. It's changing how Bending Spoons itself operates. The company says that by the first quarter of 2026, more than 90% of its pull requests were authored or co-authored by AI. So AI isn't just a feature they're adding to Evernote, it's becoming part of the machinery that builds, operates, and improves Evernote. And that's where I think the Bending Spoons story gets really interesting, because now you have two flywheels. The first is financial. Acquire to optimize to grow to cash to acquire, but the second is technological. Acquire to data, to AI, to better decisions, to better products, to better economics, and the two feed each other. Now, here's another bizarre thing about Bending Spoons. It's incredibly difficult to get into.
So, what can you expect as you progress through our recruiting process? Well, lots of challenges and hopefully lots of fun too.
In 2025, the company reportedly received around 800,000 job applications for roughly 325 hires. That's an acceptance rate of approximately 0.04%. For context, that's not hiring. That's a university entrance exam. The company talks extensively about something called talent density. The basic philosophy is that a small number of exceptionally capable people can accomplish a disproportionate amount of work. And that philosophy fits perfectly with the business model. Because if you're trying to operate dozens of companies with a relatively lean central organization, you need extremely productive teams. You can't build a 500-person organization every time you acquire a new company. The entire thesis depends on leverage. Now let's talk about scale. Because this is where Bending Spoons stops sounding like an interesting startup and starts sounding like something much bigger. According to its disclosures, the company generated $387 million in revenue in 2023. Then, $1.31 billion in 2025. That's more than a threefold increase in 2 years. The company says it has served more than 1 billion users, with millions of paying customers. And then comes the obvious question. Where did all the money come from to buy these companies? Initially, a lot of the answer was the businesses themselves. Bending Spoons was largely self-funded and used the cash generated by its products to keep expanding. But eventually, the acquisitions became too large for that alone. So the capital structure changed. Debt, equity, institutional investors. And then, the IPO, July 1st, 2026. Bending Spoons goes public on NASDAQ, ticker BSP. The company raised roughly $1.68 billion. And suddenly, this incredibly secretive Italian company was a public company. And there's something almost poetic about this. For years, Bending Spoons operated quietly, buying companies, improving them, buying another one, then another, then another. And suddenly, the entire market could watch the machine. And if you thought the IPO was the end of the story, it wasn't. Because Bending Spoons kept buying. At this point, the question isn't, what company is bending spoons? The question is, how big can this machine become? So let's go back to the question we started with. What exactly is Bending Spoons? It's not really a collection of apps. It's not exactly private equity. It's not a traditional software company. It's something in between, a company built around one increasingly powerful idea. Find digital businesses that already have something valuable, acquire them, apply an extremely disciplined operating system, improve the economics, and use the resulting cash and capabilities to acquire the next one. That's Bending Spoons. And perhaps the most interesting thing about the company is that it spent more than a decade doing this quietly. Until suddenly, everyone noticed. Evernote, WeTransfer, Meetup, Remini, Komoot, Vimeo, AOL, Eventbrite. And that's probably why you've never heard of Bending Spoons, because you've been using the companies it owns instead. Now, the real question is, how many more companies can this machine absorb?